It's 11:43 p.m., Chicago. Jake is unpacking boxes in his new apartment. A new city. A new job. A fresh start. At least, that's what he keeps telling himself. Then he comes across an old journal from his college days. The pages have turned yellow with age. He opens it. Inside, in his own handwriting, is an entry. I'm 25 years old. This is the year I change everything. My career, my fitness, my relationships. I'm finally going to become someone I'm proud of. This time, for real. Jake freezes. Today, he's 31. Slowly, he closes the journal, almost as if he's trying to hide the evidence. Because inside his head, a painful calculation has already begun. His career? The same mindset, only the job title had changed. His fitness? 3 gym memberships, all abandoned within 6 weeks. His relationships? The same patterns, the same arguments, the same emotional distance. Chicago was new. The apartment was new. The job was new. But Jake? Jake was still Jake. He sets the journal aside, walks to the window, looks out at the lights of Chicago, and a question he's been suppressing for years finally rises to the surface. 6 years. I've spent 6 years trying. So many fresh starts. Someone promises. And somehow, I'm still the same person, the same problems, the same excuses. I genuinely want to change. So why can't I? And if you've ever felt that way too, maybe not with a new city, maybe with a new job, a new relationship, a new routine, a New Year's resolution, and somehow the outcome was still the same, then that question belongs to you too. Because the problem isn't your willpower, and the problem isn't that you're not serious. The real problem runs much deeper. There are 3 hidden psychological forces that quietly keep people trapped in the same version of themselves, no matter how badly they want to change. And today, we're going to bring those forces into the light, because until you can name them, they continue doing their work in the shadows. Identity inertia. Meet Ethan, 31 years old, living in Denver. From the outside, Ethan's life looked completely put together. A decent salary, a 1-bedroom apartment filled with IKEA furniture and warm lighting, the kind of place that looked good in photos. He went to the gym 3 times a week, and whenever people asked how life was going, he always had the same answer: I'm working on myself. But beneath the surface, the truth looked very different. Over the last 4 years, Ethan had switched companies 3 separate times, and every time, the explanation sounded almost identical. This job doesn't align with my values. But the pattern never changed. The first 6 months? Pure motivation, energy, ambition. Then slowly, the old Ethan would return. Late submissions, checked out meetings, growing tension with managers, and eventually, another resignation letter. It wasn't just work. After 8 therapy sessions, he quit. The therapist just didn't get me. Then came keto, then intermittent fasting, then intuitive eating, journaling, meditation, cold plunges. Every new system felt life-changing for about 3 to 6 weeks. Then it disappeared. One afternoon, Ethan called his best friend Marcus. Maybe I need a new city. I'm thinking Portland or Austin. I just need a fresh start. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said, Ethan, you said the exact same thing before moving from Seattle to Denver. And the same thing happened there too, didn't it? Silence. After the call ended, Ethan stood by the window, staring at the blue Colorado sky. And for the first time in his life, he asked himself a question he'd been avoiding for years. Every time I change the city, the job, the routine, the diet, everything changes. So why do I always end up becoming the same person? What if I'm the problem? No, Ethan, you're not the problem. And if you've ever experienced that feeling, a new beginning followed by the same old result, then it's worth looking at what's actually happening underneath the surface. Because Ethan changed almost everything: the city, the career, the habits, the routines. But there was one thing he never changed: his identity. The internal story that begins with, I'm the kind of person who. Psychologists have a name for this phenomenon: Identity inertia. Imagine a wheel already moving in a particular direction. Unless a significant force changes its course, it keeps rolling exactly where it was headed. Identity works the same way. You can change what's happening on the outside, but if the internal wheel is still turning in the same direction, the destination rarely changes. Because identity doesn't just tell us who we are, it quietly determines who we believe we can become. That's why Ethan kept changing jobs, cities, and diets while getting the same results. The problem wasn't his willpower. The problem was that he was trying to change his behavior while keeping the same identity that created those behaviors in the first place. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Your brain is constantly trying to predict the future. To do that, it relies on deep mental models, and identity is one of the deepest models it has. So whenever Ethan attempted a behavior that didn't match his existing identity, a new gym routine, greater commitment at work, a more disciplined lifestyle, his brain treated it like a threat. Not because the behavior was dangerous, but because it contradicted the story his mind already believed. And whenever the brain detects a threat, it tries to restore what feels familiar. Which is why, 6 months later, the old Ethan always seemed to come back. Over time, this creates a vicious cycle. Identity determines what Ethan pays attention to. That attention shapes his behavior, and that behavior creates new evidence supporting the identity. Late submissions, avoidance, disengagement. Each action becomes another piece of proof, another vote for the old story. And with every cycle, the identity grows stronger. Eventually, even positive change starts feeling uncomfortable. Whenever someone challenges that identity, the brain responds with resistance, overthinking, self-doubt, restlessness, anxiety. That's why growth can sometimes feel strangely wrong, even when it's exactly what you need. Sometimes achievement moves ahead, while self-perception stays behind. And when that gap becomes large enough, it can even contribute to feelings similar to imposter syndrome. Here's the paradox. The same mental system designed to create stability can become the biggest obstacle to growth. Trying to change habits without changing identity is like rearranging luggage inside a moving train. Everything inside shifts, but the direction remains exactly the same. And the discomfort you feel during change, it isn't necessarily a sign of failure. Often, it's evidence that your brain is adapting to a new framework. So what was Ethan's real solution? Not another goal, not another city, not another productivity system. A new identity. Instead of saying, I need to stay committed to my job, he needed to start saying, I'm the type of person who follows through. Because identities create behaviors, not the other way around. To break the cycle, Ethan needed 3 things. First, gather evidence. Small daily actions that support the new identity. Tiny wins that prove the new story is true. Second, remove unnecessary decisions. Decide in advance what you'll do and when you'll do it. Because every moment of uncertainty gives the old identity another chance to take control. And third, change the environment. Spend time around people for whom your desired identity is normal. Because what surrounds you eventually shapes what feels possible. At its core, escaping identity inertia comes down to a single question. A question you ask yourself every day. What would the person I want to become do in this situation? If Ethan had asked himself that question before quitting the job, before searching for another city, before abandoning another routine, the answers might have looked very different. Every small action would have become a vote for his future identity. And if, at times, that new version felt fake, that wouldn't be a warning sign. It would be proof that the new behavior had already begun outgrowing the old identity. Because that's the deeper truth of this entire story. Permanent behavior change doesn't happen when you force new actions. It happens when you become a new person first. And when identity changes, behavior finally has somewhere new to go. Information addiction. How many times has this happened to you? It's late at night, you're scrolling through your phone. One more self-improvement video, one more productivity podcast, one more article about success, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a question appears. If I'm learning so much, why does my life still look the same? That's exactly what was happening to Maya. 26 years old, a junior copywriter living in Brooklyn. From the outside, her life looked like the perfect productivity machine. 5:47 a.m. alarm. Check Gmail. Read the morning headlines. Scroll LinkedIn to see what everyone else is accomplishing. Listen to a podcast called How to Own Your Morning. Self-improvement content during the subway ride. A YouTube video about deep work during lunch. A chapter of The War of Art before bed. Maya knew everything. She could explain Cal Newport's definition of deep work. She understood dopamine loops. She knew why creative blocks happen. And she could probably tell you 3 different ways to overcome them. But beneath all that knowledge, the truth was very different. Despite consuming all that information, Maya hadn't published a single personal piece of writing in over a year. Not one. She created a Substack account 3 different times and deleted it 3 different times, each time with the same explanation. I'm not ready yet. I need to do a little more research. On her laptop was a folder called Screenplay Ideas. Inside were 14 unfinished scripts. Not one had made it past page 3. One evening, while drinking coffee in the apartment, her roommate Chloe asked a simple question. Maya, you read so much. You listen to so much. When is your newsletter actually coming out? Without hesitation, Maya put on the same confident smile she'd used 100 times before. I just need to plan it a little more. Once everything is clear, I'll start. But what Maya was experiencing had a name: information addiction. A state where a person continuously consumes content, videos, podcasts, articles, news, even when there is no immediate need for it. Maya wasn't gathering information because she needed it. Her brain had become addicted to mental stimulation itself, addicted to learning, while quietly avoiding doing. And that's what makes this trap so dangerous. Because in the beginning, it doesn't look dangerous at all. It looks ambitious. It looks productive. It looks like self-improvement. But over time, it creates a widening gap between knowledge and action. And the reason goes much deeper than motivation. It's rooted in biology. For most of human history, new information increased the chances of survival. Learning something useful could mean finding food, avoiding danger, staying alive. So whenever we discover something new, the brain rewards us. A small burst of dopamine, a signal that says, this matters. Modern digital platforms have learned how to exploit that system perfectly. Endless scrolling, autoplay, notifications, infinite recommendations. For Maya, every new podcast episode, every LinkedIn post, every YouTube video felt like a potential reward. And eventually, her brain started confusing consumption with progress. It felt like work was happening, even when nothing was being created. Later that night, Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, and for the first time all day, the confident smile disappeared. The truth finally surfaced. I've spent 2 years planning. Every day I learn something new, but I haven't actually built anything. My notes contain thousands of ideas, but I don't have a single thing I can point to and honestly say, I made that. And that's where the real problem begins. Because listening to experts creates an illusion of understanding. The brain often mistakes easy understanding for actual competence. Maya felt capable, but her knowledge had never been tested in reality, never converted into skill. Which is why procrastination often disguises itself as learning. Instead of facing the possibility of failure, Maya searched for another book, another video, another strategy, another framework. And that's why her Substack account was created 3 times and deleted 3 times. But there was another hidden cost, one most people never notice. Constant information consumption drains mental energy. The brain is forced to continuously process, filter, and organize incoming ideas. And eventually, real creative work starts feeling boring by comparison. Writing a screenplay can't compete with the instant stimulation of a new video. Creating feels slow. Consuming feels easy. So the brain chooses easy, again, and again, and again. The truth is, Maya's problem was never a lack of information. It was the misuse of dopamine. And this is why willpower alone rarely solves the problem. Because information addiction isn't simply a personal weakness. It's often the result of an environment designed to capture attention. Which means the solution starts much deeper than behavior. It starts with identity. Maya needed to stop seeing herself as a consumer and start seeing herself as a creator. The goal wasn't to learn more. The goal was to apply more. That meant creating strict boundaries around information. No phone first thing in the morning. A specific time for news. Less random content. Less passive consumption. And here's the important part. When she first did this, she would likely experience boredom, restlessness, even emptiness. But that feeling wouldn't be a problem, it would be recovery. The mind relearning how to exist without constant stimulation. One of the most effective rules is surprisingly simple. Learn, apply, then learn again. Whenever you consume new information, extract one useful idea, just one, and apply it within the next 24 hours. Because the shorter the gap between learning and action, the more valuable knowledge becomes. After all, the world isn't changed by the people who know the most. It's changed by the people who act on what they know. And maybe that's why. One night, Maya opened her laptop, looked at the folder called Screenplay Ideas, ignored every podcast, every article, every piece of advice, and for the first time in months, she simply started writing page 4. Comfort-based decision-making. Meet Alex, 34 years old, living in Naperville. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A comfortable suburban life, a stable marriage, a 2-car garage. To everyone around him, Alex had already figured life out. He was settled, successful, safe. But beneath that picture-perfect life, another story was unfolding. A story he hadn't even fully shared with his wife, Priya. For the last 6 years, Alex had been trapped by the same illusion. 6 years ago, he came up with a research-backed idea for a sustainable packaging startup. The spreadsheets were ready. The market analysis was done. The numbers made sense. But his final decision was, the market isn't ready yet. 4 years ago, a senior position opened up at his company. He was qualified. His coworkers encouraged him to apply. He even filled out half the application, then stopped. Maybe I'm not ready yet. 2 years ago, he spent weeks researching online MBA programs, attended information sessions, compared schools, calculated costs, then decided, the timing isn't right. I have a mortgage. My child is still young. 3 opportunities, 3 different situations, and yet somehow, the same ending every time. What's fascinating is that Alex genuinely believed he was being logical, patient, responsible. But something much deeper was happening. Because the human brain is designed to prioritize avoiding losses over pursuing gains. For thousands of years, unfamiliar situations could be dangerous, sometimes deadly. So the brain learned a simple rule. Familiar equals safe. Unknown equals risky. Today, applying for a promotion isn't a life or death decision. Neither is starting a business. Neither is pursuing a degree. But deep down, the brain still reacts to uncertainty as if it might be a threat. And that's exactly what was happening to Alex. Then came a Tuesday morning. A normal day. A normal coffee shop. The kind of day that wasn't supposed to change anything. Alex was sitting inside a place called The Daily Grind, drinking coffee, listening to a podcast. And suddenly, his safe world cracked. The guest on the show was someone he recognized, a former college classmate. Back in 2015, this guy had seemed far less organized than Alex, far less prepared, far less likely to succeed. But now, he was enthusiastically describing the startup he'd built, the company he owned, the risks he'd taken. Alex slowly removed his headphones. His coffee sat untouched, growing colder by the minute. And a thought entered his mind, a thought he'd had before, but never this intensely. That could have been me. That night, after putting his child to bed, Alex stood alone in the garage, next to his car, in silence. He opened an old spreadsheet stored in Google Drive, the startup plan, the one he'd abandoned years ago, last edited March 2021. He stared at the screen for a long time, then whispered something to himself, something he had never admitted before. I wanted to stay safe so badly that I never actually tried. I kept waiting for the right time, and the time passed anyway. That feeling has a name: comfort-based decision-making, a pattern where people repeatedly choose what feels familiar, safe, and comfortable without even realizing they're doing it. The promotion, the MBA, the startup. None of those opportunities disappeared because they were bad ideas. They disappeared because they were uncertain. And uncertainty makes the brain uncomfortable. Psychologists have long observed something interesting. The pain of losing something feels stronger than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. Which is why Alex stayed inside the same safe routine for years. Maintaining the status quo requires almost no justification. Changing it requires a mountain of mental evidence. And that's where the dangerous cycle begins. Every time Alex avoided a challenge, he felt relief, immediate relief. The brain interpreted that relief as a reward, and every reward strengthened the pattern. Avoid, feel better, repeat. Avoid, feel better, repeat. Year after year. Here's the paradox. Most people believe constantly choosing comfort will make life feel safer, but the opposite often happens. The more comfort becomes a requirement, the smaller your comfort zone gets. The more Alex avoided discomfort, the fewer situations felt safe. And the most devastating consequence isn't visible right away. It accumulates quietly, in missed opportunities, untaken chances, unlived versions of yourself. Until one day, you realize something terrifying. Your greatest regret isn't the wrong decision you made, it's the decision you never made at all. So what would change if Alex got those opportunities back? The first step would be simple. Name the fear, clearly, specifically. Because vague fears feel enormous. Defined fears become manageable. The second step, replace giant leaps with small experiments. Instead of launching an entire startup, build a tiny prototype over a weekend. Instead of committing to years of uncertainty, test the idea first. And third, ask yourself a different question. Not, what if this fails? But, if I make no changes for the next 5 years, what will I regret most? Because that question shifts your attention away from today's fear and toward tomorrow's cost. The moment you learn the difference between real risk and perceived risk, the brain's old safety system starts losing its grip. And that night, Alex didn't close the spreadsheet. Not this time. Instead, he opened a new tab, pulled up the MBA application he'd abandoned 2 years earlier, and continued exactly where he had left off.